For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Hey, we're back in Dunkin' Donuts. Craig, what are you eating this morning?
This morning, as it is morning, I'm actually having a bagel with peanut butter on it.
Did you see they have a special today? It's the Welsh donut. It's a donut with a dragon. Oh, that must be... Owen, is that you? Owen, are you getting the Welsh donut?
Coming all the way across the pond for his Welsh donut is Owen.
Oh, hi. How are you doing? I'm just eating some sunflower seeds. I'm not on the donuts today. Is that all right?
Oh, that's fair.
That's fine.
So
really bland, but it's fine.
Now, if you were to have a donut, what is your favorite donut, Owen?
Oh, my donut. You know, right, I've got a strange sort of thing with donuts. The more ornate and the more stuff on a donut, the less I like it. I like a plain donut just covered in sugar.
He's a classicist.
Oh, so a powdered...
traditionalist.
What we'd call the powdered donut, then. So the cake donut with the white powdered sugar on it is your favorite.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's really odd. Going back the tail end of last year, I did a play. It was a play called Other People's Money, which is, there was a film of it with Danny DeVito.
Right, yeah.
And I played a character in that who is a donut addict. And I just ate donut after donut. I put on tons of weight. It was amazing. I loved it. But I'm sort of donutted out, hence the sunflower seeds.
I can imagine that.
People somewhere else to eat.
Fair enough. So Owen, I heard a rumor. I saw you. I follow you as I do. I follow people on the Twitter, and I follow you. And I noticed you tweeting lots of pictures of the Dungeons and Dragons Attack Wing game. Now, and so I don't know, Craig, have you played the Attack Wing game?
I have not.
So this is my understanding of how this works, Owen. And I played a brief demo at Gen Con, and I see the game now in stores. And since you own it, I kind of wanted to ask you, since I've stumbled upon you here eating sunflower seeds at Dunkin' Donuts, I wanted to ask you what you think of it and why you like it, because it is, my understanding is that they've sort of licensed the rules for X-Wing, you know, the spaceship combat game from Fantasy Flight. WizKids licensed the rules from that for them to make their Star Trek game, and now they've licensed the rules to make a aerial dragon combat game called Attack Wing set in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Is that right? Correct.
Now, I'd never really played these. I mean, these games go back years, and I don't know if you remember the Wings of War game with the biplanes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the First World War type of thing. But I always saw people playing that, but I never sort of got drawn into it. Of course, when the X-Wing version came out, I sort of jumped on that purely because the models were so nice.
Right.
But also the Star Wars background, just sort of drew me in, and I played a few games. But I wanted to get into a game. I love monsters. I love monsters. I love big fights and battles between monsters, be they superheroes, be they Godzilla, be they King Kong, whatever. I love the cinematic roar of the monsters clashing, and the D&D one just sort of appealed to me. I looked at it in its opening set. It comes in a starter set with 3 dragons and all the basics you need to play the game, and the models aren't brilliant. I'll go that far. I've never been a pre-painted guy. I've never really sort of gone for pre-painted figures. And the D&D figures in the past never really drew me in. But I thought, we'll take a look at it. I sort of fancied the game. But it's a terrific game. It really is a terrific game. I know X-Wing is absolutely huge over here. There's tournaments with 100 people plus playing. And this is very much a niche thing at the moment. But I got a feeling if they play the cards right, it's going to be a big game, good game.
Okay. So what comes in the starter box? Is it you get 3 dragons? So is it like, are there factions in the game, or do you just kind of grab whatever you want and fight with them? So could it be red on red, or do you have like is it the colors versus the metals? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, well, in the D&D world, as most of the listeners, or some of the listeners might know, the good dragons tend to be the metallic dragons, and the evil dragons as a whole tend to be the different coloured dragons. So in the starter set, you get a red dragon of Wales. There he is. And you get,
now we see what happened here.
Yeah, and he's the best.
That would all make sense.
He's the best one as well. You get the blue dragon. Don't know where he's from, and you get the copper dragon, but They can be just an adult red dragon, or they can be a named character. And there are cards featuring the named characters and the generic sort of coloured dragons, if you like. But you get the 3 dragons in the starter set, along with a host of cards and counters. And if you know Attack Wing, you need a 3x3 sort of space to play, 3 foot by 3 foot, but you probably need that space as well for your counters. Which is the only sort of drawback, but you get a lot of cards featuring different items, different powers, different scenarios, all this type of thing that you can do. But the way the game works, which is a little bit different to the Star Wars one, I think. I haven't played the Star Trek one, but I am taken in with the model of the Borg cube, which is great. I could probably live in that. It's massive.
It's huge, right?
Yes, and the Deep Space Nine one is good.
Yeah, the DS9 station's giant.
Yeah, but the way it works is every time you buy an expansion pack, like for example, I was lucky enough, I bought the starter pack, and then a friend bought it for me for my birthday, so I have 2 starter packs. But I've also got the Silver Dragon, who comes as an expansion, the Wyvern. I've got a troop of Hobgoblin troops, a troop of Elf soldiers, and I've got a Sun Mage and a Gargoyle.
Ooh, so there's troops. Now you've got me excited.
Yeah,
so let me just back up a little bit. So right now, I'm imagining building a force in my head right now.
Yeah.
So my force then could have some dragons in it, and do the dragons all have riders, by the way? Or
no, there's no riders so far.
Okay.
Although I think there is an option on some of the cards to take a rider. But the dragons are intelligent dragons with their own motivations and their own
so it's truly like
agendas, if you like.
Very cool. So it's like a kaiju battle. So 2 dragons are going at it or more, and then then there's also sort of like units of guys. Is that
there are units of foot troops? There's artillery. There's individual characters. There's smaller monsters like the Wyvern, the Gargoyle. All these type of characters can get involved in things as well.
So now you've really got me interested. So wait, I got to back up. Sorry. so the units of troops. So then I thought you were going to say they're units of flying troops, like a bunch of winged dudes or something flying along.
You can get that. There's the Arkansharkas or whatever they are.
See, Craig, this is dangerous, Craig. This is dangerous.
But okay, but I got a question.
All right.
How does scale work? Because as I'm looking through the War Store, it looks to me like the Sun Elf Troop expansion pack. Those Sun Elves look mighty tall compared to, for instance, the Ballista expansion pack. Like, is there any issue with scale at all? Like, are the dragons losing some of their majesty when an elf comes up to their chin?
I don't think so.
No?
I mean, they're all in the sort of 25 mil scale.
Right.
The dragons may be a little smaller than they are in reality, but essentially, I think it works pretty well, in all honesty. The figures are okay. You know, they're not great. What I have done with them is I've bought the figures and I've put a sort of a brown wash on them.
Yep.
So, and that brings them out lovely. It makes the figures a lot more appealing. And I've seen a lot of people who've based them nicely or painted different colours on them, and that makes a big difference if you're willing to invest a bit of time into them. So the scale may not be 100%, but it's pretty good, to be honest. About as good as you can get on something like this.
Okay, so the figures are, but they look a little smaller. So do they give you the illusion sort of that the dragons are flying high above this infantry on the ground kind of thing?
Well, the dragons are on a transparent poles. Right. They're up in the air, so they're like 2 or 3, maybe 4 inches off the ground before you start.
Right.
And then you've got the figures, which are basically on the actual board itself. So the dragon can fly over the troops quite easily, and it looks like that. It does look. It gives you a good 3D view of the battlefield.
Cool.
But this is where this differs from X-Wing, and I'm not sure about the Star Trek one, but I assume is that you've got a real hand-to-hand combat aspect, and you've also got different layers of the game. You can fly high in the sky, you can swoop and attack the men on the ground, or you can the dragons can go on the ground and fight on the floor, and that makes a big difference as well. So you've got the 3 different layers of height, if you like.
Wow, so that sounds really neat. I don't think I understood. I've seen some pictures of units, but all the units I happened to see were all flying units, so I just assumed they were smaller airborne targets. I didn't realize there's a ground war. So is this turning into sort of a army scale miniature combat game which happens to focus on air instead of ground?
It could well do. It could well do. But what it does, and going back to what we will talk about in the main D&D section, it's very story based. Mm-hmm. Every time you buy an expansion, for example, if you buy the Gargoyle, which is just a small figure on its own, and it's about £10-11 in over here. That's probably about $16-17. You think, oh, that's a bit expensive, but you get loads of scenarios in that, and it's only by doing those scenarios that you unlock other magic weapons, other power-ups for your dragons, other skills they can have. And there's a whole campaign and story that threads through all the expansion packs. So the more you buy, the more scenarios you get, the more stories you can unlock, the more powers you can give your troops. And that works really, really well.
Oh, very cool. Now, are the units and do the units all stay together in coherency, or do they spread out, or is it?
No, they have a unit coherency. You have to have one main sort of leader, and all the others go off the leader. But there are different sort of formations they can adapt, which is in the book, and that gives them powers against the dragons. The basic game itself just involves the dragons fighting. It's only if you want to expand do you actually want to take the ground troops, but it gives the game a different dimension, if you like.
Right. Well, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of meat here. Holy mackerel! I'm going through. I'm in the War Store also, Craig, looking at all these different.
There's a lot of different choices.
A lot of different choices here. Now,
and at the top of the same little section in the War Store is the Dungeon Command, which immediately reminded me, oh wait, I repainted some of my Dungeon Command stuff and thought it looked quite nice as well.
Yeah,
it does. That again, I quite like the coloured dragon. I think the red dragon is very cool. The blue dragon is cool. I've also bought the green dragon expansion pack. Really nice dragon. But the metallic ones tend to be a little flat. They just basically get sprayed copper or sprayed silver. But if you put a little ink on them, or you're willing to do a little bit of painting on them, they come up really nice. So again, it's a game. If you invest in it, it's going to give you some stuff back. And you can play it very basically, just with the 3 dragons out of the box, a couple of expansions, and just have basically dragon on dragon combat. But if you want to invest in buying the troops, buying the other monsters, and going into the scenarios, there's a real story aspect which you could run alongside a D&D campaign, which is nice.
Now, so I'm starting to wonder if there's an advantage to the scale being a little off. Are the infantry models the same size as, like, for example, the models in Dungeon Command, or are they a different scale?
I don't know Dungeon Command.
Or like a normal D&D miniature, let's say. Because Dungeon Command miniature is like normal size D&D, like 24 mil or something like that.
What they basically are is, do you know they've brought out a range of Icons of the Realms figures, etc.
Yes, yep.
They're basically those.
Oh, so they're compatible, because Icons for the Realms are designed to use in D&D, right? So if I already have a bunch of figures from, let's say, Dungeon Command, and let's say the dungeon crawling games like Wrath of Ashardalon, they're going to look the same as these guys. So if I bought one unit of guys to have the cards, I could then grab more of my orcs from Dungeon Command and have lots of orcs on the table, for example.
In theory, but every figure...
They have different bases, don't they?
Yeah,
they do.
It's a little base that the figure... This is where they differ slightly from the Icons of the Realms. Okay. The Icons of the Realms are basically a figure out of the box. It's the same figure, but it sits upon a base. Mm-hmm. And whether that be a dragon, it's a big square base with the Arc of Sight mapped out on it. Yep. But the foot troops each have like a fairly biggish base that they sit on, which gives them their powers and shows the arc of vision they have, shows what upgrades they can have. So it does sort of push you towards having to buy the actual attack wing figures. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing to stop you, reusing the bases if you come up with your own stuff. Excuse me.
Very cool. Now, do they have? How does the first of all, I guess I would want to know, like, how do the rules translate from sort of how does this version of X-Wings rules with dragons? Does it feel like dragons are fighting?
Yes, it does. The way it does is, the X-Wing mechanic where you have the little wheel where you are almost trying to predict what your opponent is going to do. You do that. But you've got the important aspect in this game is where the dragons can actually fight in hand-to-hand. Ooh. But the hand-to-hand range goes to level 2 on the big scale, the big ruler you have, which is probably about 8 or 9 inches. Mm. So in front of it or behind it, attacking with either its claws or its mouth, or by whipping its tail or a tail weapon, the dragon can fight in hand-to-hand. And when it has a breath weapon, it uses that as a missile, but the breath weapon can only be used on average every 2 to 3 turns. So you've got that aspect of the hand-to-hand combat, but with the hand-to-hand combat, the opponent's armor comes into account. But then you've got that deadly breath weapon, which you can let off every 2 to 3 turns, which totally ignores your opponent's armor and can bring them out of the sky really quickly.
Wow! Now, do you find the game is a slow plotting game? Ponderous game because it's hard to get in close and grapple, or is it pretty easy to get in there and fight? Or, what I mean, is it a fast playing game, or is it more of a slow, strategic thinking game where you just fight every once in a while?
It's at your own pace, but I found it. I played a game just a few days ago with a friend of mine, Justin. Shout out to him. And we played a good game with. It was a 120-point game. There's an 8 points value system, which is a fair-sized game. We had. I had 3 dragons. He had 2. And we played that in just under 2 hours. So, and that was a really nice sort of paced game. We played along, we chatted a bit, but it was a good experience, and it came in about just under 2 hours, I'd say.
Nice.
And there was a lot of action in that. There was very few turns where we weren't actually fighting.
Okay, cool.
Oh.
And my other question, so it sounds like. Then you feel like there's these dragons circling and engaging, and when you get close enough, they can reach out. Now, can they actually grapple and sort of like tangle up and fall from the sky?
They each have different abilities. Okay. So, for the green dragon, for example, has an acid breath, which can melt armor and then sort of melt people. Ooh. The red dragon breathes flame. There are different types of breath weapon as well. There are cones, or there's big sort of, circular sort of weapons, which just sort of drop a bomb, basically, on things. There's no graphic as such about how they sort of grapple. You tend to you're rolling the dice whether they're wrestling, whether they're whipping their tail, whatever. But sometimes you'll force a dragon out of the air. You'll force it to a higher height. You'll sometimes engage ground troops on the ground. So there's a bit of imagination at work, but it very much works at different levels. I think it's a deeper game than the X-Wing game, which is very much missile based, trying to keep away from your opponent. Whereas this, you're trying to engage. You're trying to bring yourself wham in there to have the fight. If you can imagine the dragons tumbling out the air and swooping and breathing jets of flame, it really does evoke that, and it does it really well.
Very cool.
Now, one of the things that turned me off from the Star Trek Attack Wing, Owen, was the quality of the cards and the chits and stuff.
Okay.
How do you feel about you're saying it's really card driven with lots of cool cards that you can earn in the campaigns and the missions and things. Are the cards sort of flimsy, or do they have any sort of heft to them?
No, they're quite thick. They're sort of,
nice.
they're sort of a normal playing card type with thickness to them.
Yeah.
But the base cards and the cards used in the game are very, very thick and very good. Okay. The artwork on them is usually the artwork drafted from the D&D books. So it's nicely done. It's quite colourful. Some of the dragons, as I say, I've got the blue dragon in my hand here, and there's one aspect where you can give it its name. It's a named character. It's a Shadra, the blue dragon, or it's an adult blue dragon. Mm-hmm. And when you choose a Shadra, you get a nice card with a picture of the dragon on and the dragon's abilities. The pictures you get above the weapons, the items, the missions are all very good and very evocative. I think the artwork is actually quite good. I've not seen the Star Trek game. I've seen it on the shelf. I've not actually played it. But it's about on a par with the X-Wing one, if you like, I think. Which I don't know if you played that at all, have you?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
How do you enjoy that?
I like it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Have you played it much?
Not recently, but I used to play it a lot. Yeah.
It's like that. It's very much like X-Wing, but it's got the added aspect of the hand-to-hand combat and the different levels of fighting, basically, and magic spells. You've got magic spells you can cast that can accelerate time, stop time, this type of thing, so your dragon can move where another player's character can't.
So do the dragons feel like the dragons you'd expect in D&D, like they're really intelligent, they're casting spells and that kind of stuff?
Yes, the dragons are full of personality. Great. There's loads of different skills they can do. There's loads of different upgrades you can buy for them. Each dragon has its own type of spell it can cast. It's got its own type of breath weapon. There's good dragons. There's evil dragons. there's a bit of fiction, a bit of fluff written in each set, which gives you the dragon's motivations. It gives you a little quest it's been on. It gives you a real flavour that the dragon is actually a personality rather than just a big flying scary monster, you know?
So I can see how the rules for X-Wing and Star Trek would translate well into dragon combat, and I get that. So how do they translate for ground combat? Do the ground forces feel right? Do the mechanics work for ground forces, and is it simple enough to kind of pick up and keep moving, or are you shifting rule sets as you move to moving your ground guys?
No, it works very well. The ground troops are, on their own. They're not up to much, but because they're in a unit formation, they actually work quite well, and they are able to fight with a dragon. What tends to happen in the scenarios in particular is the ground troops are usually objective grabbers. Sorry, they go out there, objection grabbers. That's people who just say no all the time, right? But objective grabbers, they go out there and actually do the missions. There's one when you buy the Hobgoblin troop, for example. Their mission is to take a cart across the board, so they have to try and avoid the dragon and try to get a treasure from one side of the board to the other. So there are things you have to protect. There are other things like there's a sun elf mage that can actually summon creatures and cause a dragon to fall out of the sky. So their powers don't tend to be that combat orientated, although they can fight if and when they need to, but they have lots of other things they can do which really bring a lot to the game in different ways, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's like as if your dragons are your big tanks, whereas your ground troops are more of the wizards, the clerics, this type of thing that do less of the fighting but do important jobs as well, especially in the scenario-based games.
I think the scenarios are what really make me excited to try this. Are the missions are they on their own little car? Like, how well presented are the missions? Are they on their own little
cards?
Nice.
They come in a little booklet.
Okay.
Each booklet that comes with each pack. I've got the one in my hand here, which is the one that comes with the Sun Elf troop, which is a group of 6 elven soldiers. And it's got a lovely bit of artwork on the front here, which shows an elf sort of creeping through the forest. The Adventure 3.7, Behind Enemy Lines. An important piece of intelligence was left to the Harper Legion at an unusual drop-off point at the edge of a great wooded area. But that was before an enemy force camped in front of it. Last night, the Harper Legion sent an elf troop to sneak in and retrieve the missive, but to depart in the morning light, they need the distraction of a pitched battle. And then it gives you the scenario, it gives you the table layout, it gives you what type of troops you can use, it gives you special rules for the elf troop, objectives for them after the battle, and then it gives you a special item that they can win. In this case, it's the Mithril Thorn upgrade, so they can use it then in future battles.
Oh, so it's like
really
a campaign?
Bring something to it.
So there's also a campaign system in here where I can play that scenario with Craig, and if I win, I get something, but if he wins, he gets something or prevents him from getting something?
Exactly, it's that way. And the story sort of progresses. You know that the D&D campaign, the Hoard of the Dragon Queen?
Yes. Yep.
A lot of it follows that.
Oh.
So you've got characters from that coming into this game as well.
My daughters would love this. This is because just reading the Harpers, like they just got to the part in Hoard of the Dragon Queen where they're starting to interact with the Order of the Gauntlet and the Harpers, which is great fun because they love Waterdeep, and so now all of a sudden, they're going to visit the city and they're learning all about, the whole D&D universe is coming together for them. And so to have this game, I really like what they're doing with tying this whole, the dragon thing together across all these different media types. And so this idea that my kids, players of the game, and I'm thinking of my kids here, but I think can even get more exposure to these different organizations and see them. So when they play their characters, they'll know it. And then, I think really when I played the demo of this at Gen Con, I was a little put off. I think, first of all, I've had bad demos of WizKids before, so I should have known. but B, they didn't show any depth. They really showed, we moved the dragons a little bit on this very small table and we attacked a couple times, right? I didn't really see any of the equipment cards or anything else, or, equipping your characters or spell cards or anything. Secondly, they had none of the ground combat stuff was out yet. And thirdly, there was no scenario. I think the scenarios you're describing to me, Owen, really give the game the meat for veteran war gamers to kind of say, well, this is pretty interesting. I mean, is that what you're finding?
Exactly. And what I find with it as well, I've not done this yet, but if you are going through the Hoard of the Dragon Queen, you could actually act out some of the battles through this system and enable your players to actually play as the Harper Legion, the Zentirim, those type of things in this way. And I think that would work to interact it, and actually put it into the D&D game in that way. It would work really, really well. But it also gives you that aspect of you never actually get to play the dragons. And the dragons, if you're looking at like Smaug in The Hobbit, they can be real characters.
Right.
And it gives you that chance to actually play as a dragon, and there's nothing cooler than that either, is there?
No, right.
So, which is a really good system. I really enjoy it. It's quite simple once you get your head around it. The starter set is a good starter set. It's not too expensive. The figures in that are quite nice. If you were to expand it, I would recommend anybody buy the starter set and maybe buy an expansion or two just to see if they like that campaign scenario-driven system, because that is what really makes the game, in my opinion. That little difference, that little something that's a little bit different from other war games, and that really does it.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Now, when you play, Owen, do you guys use any terrain, or do you not, because you're supposed to be up in the air anyway?
No, we used terrain. When I played this week, we had a big tower in the middle, and so the dragons were actually flying round the tower at one point. And we also had like a couple of village sort of buildings in it. I think there are rules, I've not done this yet, for actually setting things aflame, for crashing into the towers and damaging the buildings and all that type of stuff. So that, could be a good aspect of it as well.
Now, I also noticed it looks like they're supporting the game pretty well. So I'm on the War Store here looking at all the different...
yeah, it looks like they've got it out to at least the next 2 waves that haven't even been released.
Not only the waves,
yet.
but I didn't realize this, but they have Attackwing Dungeons & Dragons bases. So, and they're different colors. So it looks like I can buy a bag of red bases or yellow bases or green bases. So what I'm guessing here is I can replace the bases on my stock bases, which are all clear, with red bases, so that if I'm fighting Craig and he's got the same colored dragon, he could use blue bases and we wouldn't confuse our armies. Is that what that's for?
Exactly, yeah. I've not seen those, but that would be a really great way of doing it. What I've actually done is I've got 2 red dragons, 2 copper dragons, 2 blue dragons, but I've actually just painted a little bit different on the dragon to actually differentiate. But, that's another good way of doing it. And you could also bring in your, if you've got any of the Icons of the Realms figures or the, board game figures, you could bring those in as well. Then.
Right. It seems like you could do that. So that sounds really nice. And they've got the dice expansion so I can get more dice. And they've got, as Craig was saying, there's quite a few waves here of stuff. So it seems like it must be doing pretty well, that they've already released so many expansions for it. Does it feel like, and how is the game picking up in your local group? Is it just you and a couple of friends who are playing, or are you finding
that's interesting, because there's a place not far from me now called the South Wales Gaming Centre, which is it's the stuff dreams are made of at the moment. It's a massive store, huge store with like 100 tables, loads and loads of people go in there. There's a lot of, it's really taken off in the last couple of years. So I went there recently, and there was a whole section devoted to Attackwing. There was the Star Trek one, there was the X-Wing one. And I was with a friend, and he purchased some of the X-Wing stuff. And then they mentioned an X-Wing tournament, and there was an X-Wing tournament, a 50-player tournament coming in a couple of weeks. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really good. And we were going to go into it, and there were only a couple of places left. But I asked him about D&D Attackwing, and he said, although there was a big section in the store all about it, he said, well, we've not really had any interest in it. So I thought, oh, that's a bit odd. And when I went to another store as well, I know the owner there, and he's told me, he said, oh, only you and one other person has been buying this. So I'm not sure how well it's taking off, but it's being incredibly well supported, and it's out there, and WizKids has got a lot behind it. But I haven't come. The only players I've played against are people I've almost forced the game on. I've said, look, have a game of this, but they've all really enjoyed it. So I don't know how well it's doing. In all honesty,
I'm seeing the same problem locally. So I've seen. Lots of X-Wing. X-Wing's huge in our gaming group, and as you say, you can see it. There's tournaments everywhere. X-Wing, I would say, has become as big as just about any other miniature war game out there in terms of, community and player support and all that. So Fantasy Flight's really got a winner there. I would say Star Trek, I've also seen it though. I mean, I know Craig and I have talked on the show a couple of times where there's a couple of Star Trek Attackwing leagues in our area that sometimes come on our same gaming night, and we kind of fight for table space. So I know there's quite a few of them out there, and they're very passionate about it. But of course, you've got that really hardcore Star Trek community fueling that, and you got the good mechanics from X-Wing, so that's solid. But you're right, I have never, except for Gen Con, I have never seen a game of Attackwing played, not even once, at our local store. They do carry it. I've seen it on the shelf, and I look at it, But until I've spoken to you about it, Owen, it doesn't call to me. It doesn't. I don't know. I think the combined package of what it's trying to do sounds great, but I don't think they do a good job of presenting the combined story either there or on their website. If you go to their Attack Wing website, it really doesn't. They need like a picture of a full battle with all the different kinds of troops on the table and sort of somehow explaining what it does. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't really sell itself well.
Well, look at it here. They're fighting against the might of Star Wars here.
Sure,
and the background you've got there. And there's nothing cooler than fighting battles with Star Wars ships. Right. Star Trek as well has its own huge following. And recreating some of those Star Trek battles is really appealing. D&D, although it's got its Forgotten Realms, that isn't in the mainstream, is it? Unless you're a D&D player, playing Drizzt or a Limster or any of those characters isn't going to draw you into the game. I think it's going to look at a different audience. Maybe people who aren't so keen on Star Wars or Star Trek, if there are any. But yeah, it's got a battle on its hand to actually find a space there because it doesn't have those recognizable characters that's going to draw you into the game. But it does have a lot more aspects to the game, the scenarios, the ground fighting, the different levels, the hand-to-hand combat that those games don't have. So I'd say to anybody out there, give it a chance because it might just surprise you.
Yeah, it's also got weight of product. If you look at how many Star Trek ships are out,
right,
and how many of these, I mean, the Attack Wing's only been out for what, like less than a year, right?
Oh yeah, it came out of Gen Con this year, so it's only been out for 6 months.
I mean, look at how many they've already got. Way more expansions than there are for Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a weight of they're churning out product. Whether I agree with Russ that they're not doing a great job marketing, but they're definitely churning out product. There's way more of that than there is Dungeon Command. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Dungeon Command I saw Dungeon Command got a little traction locally with us. I liked it. My kids liked it. I know it got quite a bit of play at the store. It's a good, solid game. With Dungeon Command, you kind of know what you're getting with that, right? I think the problem Attack Wing has is you don't know what you're getting, and I think they could do well with it. I think if they, it's never going to sell like Star Wars does, and a part of the challenge is the models aren't awesome. I think if they'd come out, I think two things.
The painting is not awesome.
Yeah, the painting.
I would say that. I would not say the models aren't awesome, but the painting is not.
And they also missed the trick, I think, too. Like they just released the Tiamat model, right? The Dungeons and Dragons Tiamat model. Now that Tiamat model does not come with rules for Attack Wing.
Right.
That was
there's a lot of crossover that they do in a lot of their games that they're not doing with this.
Like Dungeon Command comes with the cards so you can play it in the dungeon crawling games like Wrath of Ashardalon, right? Those I can buy Dungeon Command as either a standalone game or as a model booster and monster booster for Wrath of Ashardalon or Legend of Drizzt or anything like that, right? In Attack Wing, I should be able to buy, they're coming out with all the Icons of the Realms. I feel like all the Icons of the Realms stuff, since they've kind of not really worried a lot about scale anyway, I feel like the Icons of the Realm stuff should be compatible with Attack Wing. They missed a trick there.
The problem there is that all you need are a couple cards to cross over between Dungeon Command and the dungeon crawlers. But with Attack Wing, you need all the dials and you need all the cards.
I guess you're right. Yeah,
there's a whole package that you need to cross over. And what I'm looking at, if you go on eBay, not that I'm at all intrigued by any of this.
I know, right, Craig?
You'll see there's a lot of. There are a lot of crossover elements, but what they are the every month apparently there's a store support kit for organized play.
Right.
So that's where you're seeing some of these really cool models that you'll recognize and Tiamat and Bahamut abilities and stuff like that, but you're only going to be able to get them in your store, and they're on whatever I'm seeing month 7, month 8. And the only way to get those early things, and they did, it looks like they did a whole marketing push tied in with the Tyranny of Dragons.
Right.
But that was all in-store marketing. So if your local store didn't do it, then now you're looking at $100 or $200 on eBay.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Is what I'm looking at.
I mean, most of the figures that are coming out for Icons of the Realms and the characters are coming into Attack Wing, but they tend to come out a couple of months later. I agree. I've not seen, this sort of online or any store support because I haven't. All the only games I've played have been amongst my friends and with my family. My son really likes it, but so I don't know has it got legs? I don't know. But what I will say is it's a really nice game. And if you're willing to invest a little bit in the figures, you'll do okay with it.
Yeah, I think, I think you've got me, my interest is very, very piqued, and I think my daughters would like it. So,
I think they would. I think they really.
Yeah.
My son is 12, and I've also got my youngest son is 10, and they really like it. I mean, they love the monsters fighting. They like the characters, but they love D&D as well, just like your kids, and they are really drawn into it. But it's not the cheapest thing, so I would recommend buy a starter pack and maybe buy an expansion pack or two just to see if you take to it.
So I want to get. I think the scenario is going to drive people to like it. So what would you recommend if I'm going to go out and get the starter set? Obviously, you want to start there. Is there some good scenarios in the starter set, or do you need a few more models to really feel like there's
a few good scenarios in the starter set, but it basically talks you through the basic aspects of the game.
Got it.
So there's 3 or 4 different types of game you can play in that. But I would really recommend buying the Green Dragon, because the Green Dragon opens up the whole story side of it. Right. And I think it was one of the first releases, so it's really early in the story. And there's a couple of really nice scenarios that come with the Green Dragon.
Got it. So it's get the starter set and the Green Dragon.
And the Green Dragon is one of the nicer models as well.
Okay, cool. All right, good tip. All right, well, thank you so much, Owen. I'll let you go back to eating your sunflower seeds, but I'm
just picking them out of my teeth now.
What a nice surprise to catch you here at Dunkin' Donuts eating sunflower seeds. And we'll have you back on the main show here in about a week to talk more about Dungeons and Dragons.
Look forward. Excellent.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.